In this module, we'll talk about the issues in language testing caused by the variations in the use of English by non-native speakers. We see that all the international English language tests are based on how close the test taker's performance is to the norms of native English speakers, or the norms of standard English used in native English speaking countries, which means that the performance of the test takers is evaluated on the extent to which they conform to the norms of native English speakers. Now, a difficulty which is faced by the evaluators of these tests is that it is difficult to differentiate between errors and the forms of language which are only characteristic of a particular variety of English. For example, if it is Pakistani English language test taker and he uses a word like equipments, now it will not be clear to the evaluator whether it is an error or a mistake based on lack of knowledge of the test taker, or whether it is a characteristic of Pakistani English and the test taker is not making a mistake. So with the development of so many varieties of English all around the world, English language testing is becoming a little difficult and problematic. Language tests do not really reflect the differences between native and non-native speaker norms. The tests, as we've already said, are based on only native English speaker norms, and they do not reflect the differences. Although there are so many differences in the use of the language, in the use of English language in outer expanding circle countries and inner circle countries, but these differences, although they are acknowledged on many forums, are not acknowledged in English language testing and are not addressed in English language testing. Because of this reason, for example, learners of English in outer expanding circle learn a certain variety of English, but they are tested on the native variety of English, and therefore this practice is raising lots of doubts about the validity of tests based on native speaker norms. Before we go on, let's take a look at what we mean by validity. Validity in testing refers to how well a test measures what it claims to measure. So, if a test claims to measure students' performance vis-a-vis their knowledge of native speaker norms, and the learners are not really trained in those norms, the idea is to test the learners on the English that they've learned. But these tests do not test the learners on the English they've learned. They test the learners on the English that they do not know, that is, the native English speaker norms. Now, what is the solution to this problem? The biggest solution is a paradigm shift. So we need to completely overhaul language testing and devise strategies where these variations in the use of English are addressed. So we need to make distinction between the use of English by monolingual English speakers, that is native English speakers, and the use of English in multilingual contexts. For example, in outer and expanding circle countries where people use English as a foreign or a second language along with their other languages, one or more other native languages. So the English language testing system needs to address these distinctions. And the other thing that is needed is this mutual exposure to different varieties of English. The non-native speakers should be exposed to the native variety of English, and similarly, native speakers of English should be exposed to non-native varieties of English. So we need to completely rethink English language teaching goals as well. For example, if we continue making a native English speaker as the target for English language, and then see that our learners keep failing reaching that target, then we, instead of encouraging people to use English, we are in fact discouraging them from learning and using English, because we always declare them as failures. So we need to rethink our English language teaching goals, and along with that, we need to completely overhaul English language testing. We need to consider the differences that we see in different varieties of English. There should also be, there will be a reluctance whenever, for example, a curriculum is designed on the lines of world Englishes, including local norms, etc. There will be reluctance to accept this curriculum, because learners will know that they will not be tested on these norms or this variety of English. They will be tested on the native variety of English in international language tests. So there will be reluctance to accept, to acknowledge the world Englishes, the fact, the paradigm of world Englishes, and there will be reluctance to accept native English language norms, and there will always be demand on the part of the learners to learn or to reach the target of developing proficiency to the same level as native speakers, which is our next to impossible target. Therefore, we need to rethink not only English language teaching but also English language testing.